Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy daily stories about cheating, revenge, and relationship advice. The fluorescent lights in the hospital flickered above me as I trudged down the hall, exhaustion gnawing at my bones. It had been a grueling 14-hour shift, the kind that left me running on fumes. Every muscle in my body screamed for rest, but all I could think about was getting home to Sarah. I pictured her waiting for me, maybe curled up on the couch with a book, or the way she used to meet me at the door with a smile and a soft kiss. But that hadn't happened in a while. Things had been off between us. Subtle changes at first, less talking, more time on her phone, the feeling of distance between us that I couldn't quite explain. But tonight, I was determined to push those thoughts aside. All I wanted was to collapse next to her, feel some semblance of normal again. When I walked through the front door, the house greeted me with an eerie silence. No lights, no sound. Just darkness. "Sarah?" I called out, my voice echoing down the hallway. No answer. I tried again, louder this time. "Sarah, you home?" I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter and pulled out my phone. There it was, a single text from her. "Out with friends. Be back late. Don't wait up." I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the words sink in. Out with friends? Since when? She hadn't mentioned anything about going out tonight, and the way she said, "Don't wait up," felt dismissive. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but what would I even say? The knot in my stomach tightened. I tossed the phone on the couch and paced the living room. She was out with friends, sure, but who? Sarah's social circle had always been small. She wasn't the kind to spontaneously go out without planning it in advance. My mind churned with questions I didn't want to ask. I shook my head, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Maybe she just needed some time away after a rough day. But still, something felt wrong. I called her, just to hear her voice, to ease the growing unease. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, and then went to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. Just checking in. Let me know when you're heading home, okay?" I hung up, my chest heavy with a sense of dread I couldn't shake. I walked into the bedroom, the emptiness of the space hitting me harder than usual. Her absence was palpable, like an echo in the quiet house. I flopped down on the bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the thoughts that gnawed at me. An hour later, she still hadn't called back. Another hour passed. My patience wore thin. Finally, I heard the faint sound of the front door opening. I sat up, my heart racing. She was home. I stepped into the hallway as Sarah walked through the door. Her face was flushed, her hair tousled in a way that wasn't usual for a casual night out. She looked startled when she saw me. "Hey, you're still up," she said, her voice light but forced. She slipped her coat off, avoiding my eyes. "Yeah, I couldn't sleep," I replied, studying her. "Didn't know you were going out tonight." "Oh, sorry, I thought I mentioned it earlier. Just a last-minute thing with some of the girls." "Which girls?" I asked, keeping my voice steady, but the edge was there. She paused for a second, her fingers fumbling with her coat. "You know, just Emma and Claire. We haven't hung out in a while." Something about the way she said it, too quickly, too rehearsed, made my stomach churn. I forced a smile. "Right. Well, glad you had fun." She smiled back, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, it was fine. I'm exhausted though. I'm just gonna head to bed." I watched as she walked past me, disappearing down the hall toward the bedroom. The scent of unfamiliar cologne lingered in the air as she brushed by me, and my heart dropped into my stomach. That wasn't hers. I stood there for a long time, staring after her, trying to figure out what was real. The days following that night felt like they passed in slow motion. Sarah's explanation about her impromptu night out with Emma and Claire had felt off, but I couldn't prove anything. I tried to push my suspicions aside, telling myself I was being paranoid, letting the stress of work and exhaustion get to me. But that sinking feeling wouldn't go away. It sat in the pit of my stomach, growing heavier with each passing day. Sarah continued to go out more often, and each time, her excuses felt thinner, her smile more strained. Little things started piling up. The text she hid when I walked into the room. The late nights when she'd come home smelling like someone else's cologne. Her sudden avoidance of any physical closeness with me. It was a Thursday evening when everything started to truly unravel. I was home early, hoping to surprise Sarah with dinner. As I was setting the table, her phone buzzed on the counter. Normally, she wouldn't leave it lying around, but tonight she had. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. It was a message from someone named Jake. Can't stop thinking about last night. Same time tomorrow. My blood ran cold. For a moment, I stood frozen, my mind scrambling to process what I had just read. The words stared back at me, taunting me with their simplicity. I picked up her phone, heart pounding, and unlocked it. A string of texts from Jake filled the screen, messages that left no room for doubt. They had been meeting for weeks. The images he had sent, the kind no husband should ever have to see, confirmed everything. I heard the front door creak open behind me. "Mark?" Sarah's voice echoed through the hallway. I snapped out of my daze, quickly locking her phone and placing it back on the counter. She walked into the kitchen, smiling, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. "Hey, you're home early," she said, eyeing the dinner I had prepared. "What's all this?" I clenched my fists at my sides, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just wanted to surprise you." "Oh, that's sweet," she said, but something in her voice felt distant, like she was distracted. She moved past me to grab a glass of water, her back to me. I stared at her, wondering how she could act so casual, so normal, after everything I had just seen. The betrayal was suffocating me. "Who's Jake?" The question slipped out before I could stop myself. My voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet of the kitchen. Sarah froze, her hand stilling over the glass. Slowly, she turned around, her expression shifting from confusion to something more guarded. "Jake? What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my anger from spilling over. "Your phone buzzed. I saw the messages." "Don't lie to me, Sarah." For a moment, the room was silent, the tension thick enough to choke on. Sarah's eyes flickered to her phone, then back to me. Her face drained of color, and I saw it, the panic. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Her mouth opened and closed like she was grasping for an excuse, something to explain it away, but nothing could. I pressed on, my voice shaking now with barely contained rage. "How long has it been going on?" She looked at me, eyes wide, as if hoping I hadn't seen the full extent of her betrayal. But the truth was out there, hanging between us like a knife. "Mark, she started, but the words died in her throat. "How long?" I demanded, stepping closer, my eyes locked onto hers. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time in weeks, she looked genuinely afraid. "A couple of months." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the admission hit me like a sledgehammer. My chest tightened, the air in the room suddenly too thick to breathe. Months. I thought back to all those nights I had sat at home, wondering where she was, doubting myself, trying to make sense of her lies. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "What did I do?" Sarah looked down, avoiding my gaze. "It's not about you, Mark. It's just. I don't know how to explain it. I didn't plan for this to happen." "Don't you dare put this on me," I spat, my anger surging forward. "I've been here, working my ass off for us, for this marriage, and you've been sneaking around behind my back with some guy." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. I didn't feel sympathy, not anymore. I needed answers, and her tears weren't going to stop me from getting them. "I never meant for it to get this far," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "It just happened." I shook my head, disbelief washing over me. Things like this don't just happen, Sarah. You made a choice. A choice to lie to me, to betray me. I'm sorry, she whispered, but the words felt hollow. Sorry. I scoffed. Sorry doesn't fix this. You've destroyed everything. She stepped toward me, but I backed away, not wanting her anywhere near me. Mark, please, let's talk about this. Talk. I laughed bitterly. We're way past talking. I don't even know who you are anymore. Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw a glimpse of the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But that image was shattered now, replaced by the reality of her betrayal. I couldn't be in the same room with her anymore. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her standing there in the wreckage of our marriage. In the silence that followed, I felt a numbness settle over me. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had trusted, had been a lie. The night stretched on, but sleep was impossible. I paced the living room, my thoughts racing like a freight train, fueled by a blend of rage and betrayal. The gravity of Sarah's affair settled heavily on my chest, but anger was rising within me, pushing me toward a decision. I wasn't just going to sit back and let this slide. I needed to take action. As the clock ticked past midnight, I grabbed my phone and dialed Tyler, my closest friend. He answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep. Mark? Is everything okay? He mumbled, still groggy. No, it's not, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to talk. It's important. All right, I'm up. What's going on? I took a deep breath, pacing again, this time in the narrow space between the couch and the coffee table. Sarah's been cheating on me. There was a long pause on the other end before Tyler finally spoke. What? Are you serious? With who? A guy named Jake, I said, my fists clenching tightly. I found texts on her phone. She's been seeing him for a couple of months. Jesus, man. I'm so sorry. What are you going to do? That's why I called. I need your help, I replied, my voice sharper now. I want to gather evidence against them, and then I want to expose them. Publicly. I want everyone to know what she's done. Tyler let out a slow breath. You're sure about this? Exposing her like that could blow up in your face. I don't care, I snapped, frustration bubbling over. She made her choice, and now she'll face the consequences. Will you help me or not? Of course I'll help, he said, his tone turning serious. What's the plan? I need you to dig into Jake. Find out who he is, what he does, anything you can. I want to know what kind of person he is and how he's been involved with Sarah. Got it. I'll see what I can find out, Tyler replied, his voice steadying. What else? I need you to be there with me when I confront them. I don't want to do this alone. I want to expose them together. All right. Let's figure this out, he said, a determined edge in his voice. When do you want to confront them? I want to catch them in the act. I'll set up a time when Sarah will be with him, and we'll confront them together. I want this to be as public as possible. Tyler paused, considering. Okay, but you need to keep your cool. Don't let your emotions take over. We'll do this smart, right? No impulsive moves. I just want them to feel what I feel, I said, trying to control the anger that simmered just below the surface. I understand. I'll get to work on my end and text you what I find. Just, hang in there, okay? Yeah. Thanks, Tyler. I appreciate it. After hanging up, I felt a sense of purpose, a fire igniting inside me. I was no longer a passive victim, I was going to take control of the situation. I grabbed a notebook and began jotting down my thoughts, formulating a plan that would expose Sarah and Jake's betrayal. Find out when Sarah is with Jake. Track their movements. Gather evidence. Confront them publicly. The more I wrote, the clearer my resolve became. I envisioned the look on Sarah's face when I revealed the truth, the betrayal laid bare for everyone to see. It would be my justice, a way to reclaim my dignity. The following days turned into a whirlwind of planning. I began keeping a close watch on Sarah's behavior, noting when she received texts and when she left the house. The suspicion had now morphed into a relentless pursuit of the truth. On a Wednesday afternoon, while I was working from home, Tyler sent me a text, "Got some info on Jake." He's a freelance graphic designer, and I found out he's been working with Sarah on some project for her job. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. A project, huh? I muttered to myself. That's just perfect. After a few back and forth texts, we agreed to meet up later that evening to discuss our next move. I was anxious to hear more, to plot out how I would expose them, but also to get some reassurance that I wasn't alone in this. That night, we met at our usual diner, the scent of fried food and coffee filling the air. As I slid into the booth opposite Tyler, he looked serious, his brow furrowed. "All right, so what's the plan?" he asked, leaning in. "We need to figure out when Sarah and Jake are meeting next. If they're working on some project together, there's got to be a schedule, right?" Tyler nodded. "I can try to reach out to some of her coworkers, maybe find out when she's been seeing him. I'll get back to you on that." "Good. We also need to think about how to approach the confrontation. I want it to be in front of people, friends, maybe even family. The more people, the better." "Okay, but we have to make sure it's not somewhere that could get out of hand," Tyler cautioned. "You don't want to lose your cool and do something you'll regret." I sighed, running my hands through my hair. "I know. I just want them to know how it feels to have everything exposed. The humiliation, the shame, I want them to experience it all." "Let's stick to the plan then. We'll find out when they're meeting, and we'll pick a location that works for both of you," Tyler said, his tone serious but reassuring. "Thanks, man. I really appreciate your support in this," I replied, trying to rein in the anger swirling inside me. As we continued to discuss the details, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I was ready to unleash the storm that had been brewing within me, and there was no turning back now. Sarah had made her choice, and it was time for her to face the music. The day of the confrontation dawned with a heavy sky, clouds threatening rain. I felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on me as I paced back and forth in my living room, waiting for Tyler to arrive. We had decided to confront Sarah and Jake at the local park, a place where friends often gathered for picnics and where I knew I could draw an audience. I wanted witnesses for this moment. I wanted them to see the truth. As I waited, I reviewed my plan in my head. I had to remain calm, keep my cool, and deliver the truth without losing control. But with every passing minute, my resolve wavered. Anger simmered just beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the betrayal I had endured. Finally, Tyler knocked on the door, breaking me from my thoughts. He walked in, a look of grim determination on his face. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady. "I think so," I replied, though my heart raced in my chest. "I've got everything I need. The texts, the pictures, and even some videos I managed to catch of them together." Tyler nodded, his expression serious. "Just remember, no matter what happens, stay focused. We want to expose them, not get into a brawl, right? I won't lose it. I hope." We left the house, the tension between us palpable as we drove to the park. My mind replayed the scene over and over, picturing Sarah's face when I revealed everything. Part of me relished the thought, while another part feared how she might react. When we arrived at the park, I scanned the area. A few families were scattered on blankets, children playing nearby, laughter filling the air. I spotted Sarah and Jake sitting under a tree, their bodies close together. They were sharing a joke, their faces lit up with that spark of attraction that made my stomach churn. "There they are," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Let's do this," Tyler encouraged, his eyes steely with determination. I steeled myself, clenching my fists as we approached them. My heart raced, and I could feel the anger bubbling up again. I wanted to shout, to make them feel the betrayal they had inflicted on me, but I had to be strategic. As we got closer, Jake noticed us first. His expression shifted from amusement to confusion, and then to realization. Sarah turned to see us, her smile faltering. "Mark. What are you doing here?" she asked, a hint of panic in her voice. "I think you know why I'm here," I replied, my tone cold. "What's going on?" Jake asked, rising to his feet, his body tensing as if preparing for a fight. "Yeah, what's this about?" Sarah added, her voice defensive. "Do you really want to play dumb?" I shot back, anger creeping into my voice. "Or should I just lay it all out for everyone to hear?" "What are you talking about?" Sarah asked, feigning innocence, but her eyes flickered with anxiety. I took a deep breath, looking around at the people nearby. I needed them to witness this. "You've been cheating on me, Sarah. I found the texts, the messages, and now I want everyone to know the truth. You're with him, Jake, when you should be with your husband." Gasps rippled through the small crowd nearby as heads turned in our direction. Sarah's face drained of color, and Jake took a step closer to me, a defiant look in his eyes. "Listen, man, this isn't the place for this," he said, attempting to sound authoritative. "No, this is exactly the place for this," I countered, my voice rising. "You need to face the consequences of what you've done. You both do." Sarah's hands trembled at her sides, her bravado cracking. "Mark, please, let's talk about this somewhere else. This isn't fair." I spat, my anger boiling over. "You've made a mockery of our marriage. You think it's fair to sneak around and lie to me while I'm working my ass off to provide for us." "I never meant for it to get this far," she said, her voice trembling now. "No, but it did," I retorted, my frustration spilling out. "You chose to betray me. You chose him." "Mark, you don't understand," she began, but I wasn't about to let her twist this around. "I understand perfectly," I interrupted, raising my voice to silence her. "I understand that you've broken every vow we made." Jake stepped forward, his body language aggressive. "Back off, man. You're out of line." I turned to him, fists clenched. "You think you can just come into my life and take what's mine? You're nothing but a coward hiding behind my wife's lies." "Coward? Look who's talking." Jake shot back, his voice low and menacing. "You don't even know what she's been through. Then enlighten me." I challenged, taking a step closer to him. "What has she been through that justifies cheating on her husband?" Tyler placed a hand on my arm, trying to hold me back, but my anger had reached a boiling point. I wanted Jake to understand the pain he had caused. "Mark, just breathe," Tyler urged quietly, but I shook him off. "Don't tell me to breathe," I yelled, my voice echoing through the park. "You both need to face this. You've taken everything from me, and now you're going to pay for it." "Enough," Sarah shouted, finally finding her voice. "This isn't helping anything." "No, it isn't," I admitted, my breath coming in heavy gasps. "But you've forced my hand. I want everyone here to know what kind of person you really are, Sarah." Tears streamed down her face, but I was past feeling sorry for her. "You made your choices, and now it's time for you to deal with the fallout." In that moment, as I glared at both of them, I felt a surge of adrenaline. The truth hung heavy in the air, a tangible force that shifted the atmosphere around us. Sarah stood there, broken and crying, while Jake's expression hardened into something dangerous. "I'm not afraid of you, Mark," Jake said, stepping closer, a fire igniting in his eyes. "Then you should be," I replied, my heart racing. "I'm not going to let you get away with this." Suddenly, Jake lunged at me, and in an instant, the park erupted into chaos. I felt the impact of his fist connect with my jaw, the force knocking me off balance. I stumbled back, but my anger pushed me forward again. I swung back, landing a punch in his gut, sending him crashing against the tree. The crowd gasped, people scrambling to get out of the way as Tyler stepped in, trying to pull me back. "Mark, stop. You'll regret this," he shouted, but I couldn't hear him over the rush of blood in my ears. Jake recovered quickly, his face contorted in rage. He charged at me again, and we grappled, trading blows in a flurry of fists and shouts. My adrenaline was pumping, each hit fueling my determination to make him feel the pain he had caused me. I felt a sharp pain in my side as Jake landed another punch, but I pushed through it, fueled by raw emotion. I could see Sarah standing off to the side, tears streaming down her face, her hands covering her mouth in shock. "Look at what you've done," I yelled at her between blows. "This is your fault too." The fight intensified as Tyler struggled to keep us apart, but the anger inside me wouldn't let up. Finally, I managed to break free, pushing Jake back with a shove that sent him sprawling onto the ground. "Stay down," I shouted, my chest heaving as I stood over him, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I could hear the murmurs of the crowd around us, their eyes wide with shock. "Mark, let's just walk away," Tyler pleaded, stepping between us. "Walk away?" I scoffed, glancing back at Sarah. "After everything she's done? No way." But as I looked at Sarah's face, a realization began to wash over me. This wasn't just about Jake. It was about the loss of the woman I once loved, the life we had built together. The fight was more than just physical, it was emotional, a representation of everything we had lost. I turned back to Jake, ready to deliver one final blow, but something stopped me. I realized that this confrontation had spiraled out of control, and as much as I wanted to exact my revenge, I didn't want to become a monster in the process. "Get up," I said, my voice quieter now. "Get up, and get out of my life." Jake stared up at me, anger still flashing in his eyes, but the fight had gone out of him. He got to his feet slowly, brushing himself off as he looked between me and Sarah. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low. "You don't know who you're messing with." "Neither do you," I shot back, feeling a mix of relief and anger coursing through me. As Jake turned and walked away, I felt a rush of triumph mixed with a sense of emptiness. I had confronted them, I had fought for my dignity. But in that moment, standing in the park, surrounded by onlookers,